Hi, this is Andrew Gibbons. This is the second video about the function and the features of the heel. And in the first video we talked mostly about the heel and its points of support, both external, where it touches the ground behind the leg, and also we talked about this little ledge here, the sustentaculum talus, that sits right up underneath the ankle bone. And today we're going to use the heel as a jumping off point to understand a little bit about how the arches in the foot help keep us more stable and strong in standing. I had a session with a client last week who was just shocked to discover that the contact of the fourth and fifth toes with the ground made such a huge difference in both her levels of pain and discomfort, but also in her capacity to function as a musician. And I thought it'd be useful to understand this a little bit. Why would having the fourth and fifth toes a little bit more in contact with the ground, a little more present in providing the support, make such a difference? And to understand that, you need to understand that the heel, while there is a single heel, as you move forward in the foot, obviously the heel turns into the five toes. And there are at least 2 or 3 arches in the feet. There's usually one arch considered underneath the inner edge of the foot, and there's one also considered under the outer side of the foot, and there's another one underneath the knuckles of the foot here, the transverse arch. But today we're just going to really understand how the positioning and the connections of the heel create and support the two longitudinal arches in the foot. And you really need to understand something, that the 2 arches are right here. I'm going to lift this up so you can see it better. One is a connection from the heel into the fourth and fifth toes. You can see how there's just this nice long connection. And the other arch is really coming from the ankle, that's the ankle bone back in here, into the first, second, and third toes. If we flip the foot over, you can see it from the bottom. Might be easier. When we look at the bottom of the foot, something most of us are not familiar with, you can see how it's really possible to separate out these 2 longitudinal sections. Now, the important thing to understand, that's a lot of bones to look at, is when you consider the 2 arches in the feet, it's not as if they sit next to each other, one arch like this and one arch like this. And it's not even like a rake, where a rake you have a single handle and then it emanates into the fingers of the rake. But in the foot, those 2 main arches, one really sits under, a little bit under the other. So you don't have them side by side, you have the lateral arch sitting a little bit under the medial arch. And that under takes place at a very interesting junction, which is right back, if you can see my finger right under here. This bone, which is the cuboid, it connects the heel into the fourth and fifth toes. The cuboid, when you come to look underneath it, it's quite large. It has this very prominent, another prominent ledge or wing that really sits quite centrally up underneath the third, second, and the navicular, which connects into the big toe. So the way in which the cuboid is really clearly organized and snugged up underneath the foot makes a huge difference. And most people, even if they're told you should use the fourth and fifth toes a little more clearly or try to get some support from the fourth or fifth toes, very often to get there, they will, sorry about that, very often they'll roll. They'll roll the foot. They'll go that way to get onto the fourth and fifth toes. And that does something not so hot into the ankle and the heel, when really there's a more specific movement. You see this little seam here, this seam between the cuboid and the heel. Do you see how it's open to crack? Well, if I lift the cuboid just so, I make the 2 bones become flush with each other. And that flush quality gives them much more integrity for the forces going through the foot when we step and when we stand on the foot. So the lifting of the cuboid takes place in such a way that it's lifting up underneath the rest of the foot. Here it is from under here. It's turning up, I'll gesture with my finger, up underneath that direction. It obviously doesn't get so far as to be all the way under here, but you want to understand it really is sitting somewhere just underneath these parts just behind the third toe and even a little bit in the second toe. The direction of the lift is coming from the outside up underneath the medial arch. So these understandings of how the heel actually connects going forward in the foot are very, very important to understanding where strength and stability come from in a person and the way that they function. The other thing that's so interesting about the heel is that sitting on top of it is this right here, the ankle. It's called the talus. That stout little ledge, if you remember, was the sustentaculum talus. Well, now sitting on top of the talus, sitting on top of that, you have the talus itself. And it's a curved surface, and it's curved for a very interesting reason, because the talus glides forward and backward as we step, as we go up on our toes, as we walk. Yeah? That gliding action is so central to human locomotion. And you really want to understand and practice the movement of the talus, understanding what it is that you're practicing. Yeah? The talus sits inside or underneath these two bones of the lower leg. A nice image is to imagine these are like a garage. And the talus is sort of sitting in there like a car that's in the garage. And you want the gliding of the talus to occur in such a way that as it glides forward and back, you don't take the mirrors off. Yeah? Everybody's backed out of a garage with a car, and you have to look both ways and look in your mirrors so that you have a real simple quality to the driving, so you don't scratch up the car. It's the same notion. So you're looking for that clear glide, and that glide is really providing this kind of longitudinal connection through the foot, and that provides both power and momentum and balance. So when you consider your own standing, you can think about how the fourth and fifth toes have something to do with the way they're connected back and up and underneath the other three, and everybody winds up back into the heel there. So it's quite an interesting design here for the foot, and it's something you want to consider in your own function and your own study. Okay, I'm Andrew Gibbons. Thanks.